There we go. They should be coming across now.
Okay, usually we, Reverend Ward, we ask, oh, here we go.
Come across for me.
Good morning and welcome to Mount Vernon Unitarian Church. My name is Becky Brandt and I'm a member of this congregation. Whether you are new to our community or a longtime member, no matter what prompted you to set aside this time and join us in worship, know that you are welcome here. We especially welcome our visitors this morning. You're invited to stay after our virtual worship for our social hour. And if you want to be in touch with us, please send an email to info@mvuc.org. We are a community dedicated to welcoming the stranger and working for justice wherever the heavy weight of oppression has dug into the fabric of life. To that effort, we counter the doctrine of discovery by naming and honoring the traditional indigenous inhabitants of this land, the Piscataway, the Powhatan, and the Doge. In this time of uncertainty, when we are unable to gather in person, we gather virtually to find comfort, to recommit ourselves to the mission of supporting one another in our spiritual journeys, working for the care of the earth, and building the common good. We gather to recommit ourselves to dismantling systems of oppression and injustice. It is good to be together. This morning, it is my great pleasure to virtually introduce Reverend Greg Ward. Today we are in a pulpit swap with his congregation, Mission Peak UU Church in Fremont, California. Reverend Kate is preaching there this morning. Reverend Greg Ward is a cradle Unitarian Universalist, on a lifelong quest to discover and provide courage and strength for risk and collective liberation. He was a seminary classmate of Reverend Kate and has served congregations in Toronto, Atlanta, and various congregations up and down the West Coast. And as I mentioned, he currently serves the Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist congregation in Fremont, California, where Reverend Kate once served as DRE. This morning, as usual, please turn off your cameras so that you can move about without distracting others. And at the end of the service, after the postlude, we invite you to turn on your cameras so that you can greet Reverend Ward and see each other and give a virtual hug and wave. I invite you now to take a deep breath and enter into our time of worship.
Please join with me in the spirit of this reading to light our chalice. This from Frederick Gillis. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us this morning and always.
Would you join me in singing number 1046, Shall We Gather at the River? Shall we gather at the river, where bright angel feet have trod, with its crystal tide forever flowing by the throne of God? Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. On the margin of the river, washing up its silver spray, we will Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Soon we'll reach the shining river. Soon our pilgrimage will cease. Soon our happy hearts will quiver with the melody of praise. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river. Gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God.
Now let us join our voices together in reciting our MVUC covenant, found within our hearts and on the screen. Love is the teaching of this church. The quest of truth is its daily task, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in community, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. This is our covenant with each and with all.
How many of you have ever heard of the rapture? It's a complicated idea adopted by some religions of what will happen when the world ends. If you are a true believer, these religions say, you will be swept up into heaven and all the not so good people will be left behind. What do you think of that? Some people believe in this so much that one person even created a business and he advertised it on the internet, and it was called the After Rapture Pet Care Service. This person described himself as an atheist, which he said was a benevolent asset to those people who believed in the rapture. He said he didn't plan on being swept up, but for all of the people that were planning on being swept up, he would take care of their pets. Does that sound crazy? Well, have you ever been called away unexpectedly? Found out that you had to go somewhere and you had to do something and you didn't have any time to plan ahead? Sometimes that happens for all of us. And do any of you have dogs or cats or hamsters or turtles? What happens if you have to go somewhere suddenly and you aren't able to make plans for the pets that you really love? Now, this may sound crazy, but I know the rapture is true. I know because I was part of it. In 2005 and 2006, my church went to go help the people in New Orleans. It was just after Hurricane Katrina, and we spent a week each time working at the emergency veterinary clinic in New Orleans. It seemed that a lot of people had to leave really suddenly. Many were swept up and they couldn't take their pets with them. Their pets were left behind, and we didn't think that that was right. So some of us went around town and began to sweep up all of the pets. And some of us stayed behind at the shelter and took care of the animals that came in and made it into something like a dog and cat heaven. We washed them, we walked them, we fed them, we brushed them, and we loved them. But the best part was when their owner came to look for them and we could see them being swept up. So, what I'm asking you to do today is to be a believer in the kind of rapture that you really can count on, the kind that asks you to look for those in trouble, to love them, to feed them, to make room for them, and to care for them as best you can until it is time for them to reconnect with what gives them life. Can you be part of that rapture? Because if we could all do that, we would know what it felt like to hold open the door to heaven.
Hi, folks. My name is Alan Bunner. I'm a member of this congregation. I began coming to MVUC about 1986 when my children enjoyed the liberal religious education experience that was a feature unique at MVUC. When the kids got older and my career consumed my schedule, we drifted away from the church. But then, sometime later, an MVUC choir member, Fran Grizar, heard me singing at a karaoke restaurant, and she said, you should come join the MVUC choir. So I did, and I loved it. And I came to love the entire MVUC experience, the good company, the services, the children gathering for story time, the music. My wife Leah and I were married by Reverend Linda Peebles, an MVUC minister. Now I look forward to the Sunday services, even via Zoom. I appreciate so many things that MVUC that makes it special. We're so blessed to have the talent and the dedication of Mark Zimmerman, our music director. We're so fortunate to have the skill and genius of Dr. Yvonne Ng, our amazing pianist. We have a terrific minister, and so many other dedicated people who volunteer their services for the community. I appreciate being part of a group of liberal-minded friends who welcome discussions on science themes. I appreciate the opportunity to occasionally speak from this pulpit in summer services. I enjoy the chance to talk about my views on man's place in the cosmos. Hey, where else could someone hear a homily in defense of atheism? I appreciate our emphasis on the search for truth. So I support this special congregation with an automatic pledge every month. It's easy, and it's one of the most worthwhile things I do. This place is exceptional. Thanks for listening.
Hearing the stewardship stories from members and friends is so heartwarming. It reminds me of the vitality and importance of our religious community. Mount Vernon Unitarian Church continues to share the plate with committed organizations that our members have chosen. For the month of February, we share our generosity with No Child Goes Hungry. No Child Goes Hungry is dedicated to the elimination of childhood hunger, one kid, one meal at a time. With funds donated by churches, private organizations, and individuals, they work with faith communities and other organizations to alleviate hunger on a local level. They provide grant money as well as mentorship opportunities so that community organizations can build hunger advocacy programs that will thrive and grow as their communities continue to tackle the problem of local food insecurity. We split our offering 50-50 between No Child Goes Hungry and MVUC unless otherwise directed by you. You are welcome to write a check and mail it to MVUC. You can also make payments via text or our church account via credit card. Information is found on the slide and in the chat box. During this time of music, we invite you to tenderly name in the chat box or in your heart the joys and sorrows that you hold within your heart.
Please join with me in the spirit of this reflection. Nearly 25 years ago, when Kate and I first left seminary and went out into the world of our professional ministries, I found myself almost through my first year of parish ministry in Atlanta, Georgia. The year was going pretty well. The congregation liked me. They told me so. Still, I worried that I'd really just managed to temporarily pull the wool over their eyes. Sooner or later, they were bound to figure out that I wasn't smart enough or caring enough or spiritual enough. And the moment that they did would be the end of the world as I knew it. My job, my career, my dreams. Now, my fears weren't particularly sophisticated or logical. They didn't require much in the way of fact or evidence. Like most fears, they had a few vague references from my past fashioned onto a sharpened worry that was constantly pointed at my future. But something changed. One day, when I was out getting the mail, a tiny kitten appeared right down at my feet. Now, my apartment complex where I lived literally had hundreds of feral cats, but this one, tiny as it was, came out of hiding to circle around my feet like a holy beggar. She looked up at me, meowing, starved for both food and attention. So I brought her home and I named her Blanche. Now, people always assume that I got the name Blanche from Blanche Dubois, the character in Streetcar Named Desire, who said, "I've always depended on the kindness of strangers." I did not. I got the name from luminary minister Gordon McKeeman, who a few months prior to that had shared a story with me about a parishioner that he knew. The story was about Frank, an inspiring figure for McKeeman. Rain or shine, Frank had a knack of returning your lost spirit despite all of his own struggles. Many people in McKeeman's parish struggled, but unlike most, Frank carried his struggles on the outside. Frank had multiple sclerosis, a degenerative disease which increasingly impairs muscle function. When Frank walked the 5 blocks from his home to church, you stopped and noticed his determination. When he walked to church in the snow, you stopped and applauded. Most of the time, no one pays much attention to our struggles, and just in case they do, we tend to hide them. But Frank knew there was no hiding his. MS was always in his face. It taunted him and chided him and had plans to overpower him. And worst of all, it was constantly, publicly proclaiming the end of times was at hand. But Frank saw a choice. He could let his condition overpower him. He could cower before it. He could be angry, refuse to talk about it, isolate himself and hide, or he could turn around, accept this odd partner, and ask it to dance. And so he continued on through the snow, inspired and inspiring others. And in so doing, he brought his partner with him every step of the way. In fact, he began to introduce this partner to everyone he met. And because life partners need a good name, he decided to call her Blanche. Have you ever wondered what happens when we die? What happens when that big booming voice of consciousness calls out, pencils down? Do we turn in our paper? Is it graded? By who? Using what answers? Are we graded on a curve? What happens if we pass? What happens if we don't? It turns out that almost everyone wonders about such things once in a while, even if they don't admit it. You may have enjoyed speculating on the topic with friends at parties, becoming amateur theologians. Now, when professional theologians get together and do this, it's called eschatology. However, it's important to know that when amateur theologians ponder the afterlife with friends over a beer, it's called eschatology. No difference. There's no difference because there's no empirical evidence one way or another to distinguish the two. The only exception is when you happen to be arguing with a group of people who self-declare themselves as experts on the subject. And we all know such people and have been in such conversations. And there is a name for this kind of conversation and these kind of people, and it is called annoying. Eschatology, from the Greek eschatos, meaning last, and ology, meaning the study of. It is the study of last things, final events, the end time. It is a field that has been around since the very first person died, when those who loved and missed them wondered what happened to their unique spirit and essence. Nothing precious ever just suddenly disappears without us wondering what happened. In fact, we are hardwired to wonder. Neurocognitive researchers in the last couple decades have demonstrated that human beings witnessing an ordinary sequence of events that are suddenly truncated are hardwired to extrapolate those events to some logical conclusion. In other words, fill in the blanks. For instance, if you are walking toward an intersection and 10 feet away, you see a car coming down the street toward you, but 5 feet away, there's a large sign that blocks your view of the car, your brain is wired to create a litany of probable scenarios that enable you to make quick and decisive judgments about how to safely proceed. It's a mechanism that exists to help us anticipate, predict, and maybe even influence the best outcome. Now, if we take this mental security mechanism and apply it to amateur theologians pondering eschatology, we can understand the natural impulse to extrapolate beyond what we know, to try and determine whether the probable scenarios after death will be good or bad, so that as that time approaches, we can judge and adapt our behavior, increasing behaviors that lead to a good outcome and decreasing those that lead to a bad one. But neuropsychology is also quick to point out that mental extrapolation can only draw conclusions about information and experiences already filed in our memory. So while making spatial judgments about avoiding cars to reach the other side of the road can be pretty straightforward, fashioning conclusions about what happens at the existential turnstiles of life, establishing mental constructs for places like heaven and hell that we've never been to, is fraught with a variety of cultural phobias and fears and rescue scenarios. Which brings us to the rapture. The rapture, for those of you who are not from these parts or who haven't listened to a lot of Garrison Keillor, is an apocalyptic encounter with divine judgment, where the world as we know it ends and the faithful are taken up and delivered from the perils of this earth to a more heavenly realm. And the forgotten, they are left behind to cower in judgment, to gnash their teeth, or join a Unitarian discussion group. In the immensely popular book series called Left Behind, Tim LaHaye describes it as a time where those not chosen suddenly began to find clothes scattered all over the place, left behind by the people who were swept up in the rapture. Evidently, heaven is a clothing optional facility. The Left Behind series sold more than 65 million copies and was hugely culturally influential. It is a fictional story based loosely on imagery taken from the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is the last book in the Christian Testament, which claims to be a prophecy describing the ultimate battle between good and evil. But there are many who believed, and still continue to believe, it describes real events destined to happen in our lifetime. Many who heard the word of the book of Revelation at the end of the first century and each generation afterwards have speculated that the prophecy would occur as described in their lifetime. Now, there are 4 things that I can tell you about this thinking that are verifiably true. 1, every generation that has so far believed that this prophecy would come true in their lifetime has been wrong. 2, despite the previous generation being wrong, many in the successive generation have become convinced that their newest prophecy is inevitable, even imminent. 3, from each generation, there are some so convinced that the prophecy is true, they use it to intimidate and frighten people into becoming believers such as themselves. And 4, it's not just Christianity, and it's not just religion. Every religion, and I want to be clear that things like politics for many people can become a religion, and things like money can be a religion, and even things like justice can be a religion. Every religion has a scripture that describes the end of the world as we know it, and every religion has fringe groups that preach such prophecy and cite it as evidence to scare people into compliance. Islam has it, Judaism has it, Hindus have it, countless Indian tribes have had it, so do political candidates running for office, and Fox News. There's a story of a prominent evangelical preacher who lived in a small southern town and believed fiercely in the rapture. He shared his conviction every chance he got, and in fact, so eager was he to convey this sense of prophecy that he had a habit of picking up every hitchhiker that he came upon. And when they got into his car, he would put his foot down on the gas and get the car going to over 90 miles an hour, and then tell his passenger about the rapture and announce that when it happened, he would disappear in an instant and the car would be driverless, and that they had better accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior while they still had a chance. He did claim to make quite a few converts. Now, you may think that what I'm saying about the rapture is that it's nonsense, that it's just fear and propaganda packaged to manipulate people, and that there is nothing about it that is believable. But this is where I will surprise you, because as I said earlier, I know the rapture is true. This April will mark the 15th year anniversary of a devastating fire that destroyed the apartment where I had been living with my former wife, Liz, in Monterey, California. We were both at work when the fire broke out. The apartment complex couldn't get a hold of me because I had my phone turned off. They called my sister, who then called Liz. Liz called Mark, who is the partner of the ministerial intern I was working with. And they lived just right up the road from the church. So Mark drove down to the church where Ian, the intern, and I were just finishing up a meeting. You've got to get home, Mark said, "There's been a fire in your apartment. They can't find Blanche. They think she must have escaped." I raced home to find that they had closed down the entire street where I lived. 4 huge fire trucks lined the driveway of our apartment complex. I walked past dozens of people standing and watching, and when our apartment came into view, I noticed firemen rushing up and down the stairs, moving in and out the front door. I saw my neighbor. I asked him where Liz was. He said she was looking all over, trying to find Blanche, thinking that she had escaped. It was at this moment that Liz came into view. She was walking down the stairwell toward me. She was crying, and she was carrying a blanket bundled up against her chest. When your world ends, what will you be carrying? What certainty will you cling to stave off Armageddon? What heaven will you imagine when everything around you appears to have gone to hell? "She didn't make it," Liz cried. And they went in, they looked everywhere. They tried calling her, but she was hiding underneath the couch. She was too scared to come out, and eventually the smoke got too bad and she couldn't breathe. "I am so sorry." I took the blanket with Blanche in my arms, and I held it against my chest, and we sat down together on the steps, surrounded by the fire trucks and the radios and the chaos and the end of the world as we knew it. And we wept. And that is when it all started. In the course of carrying out hoses and equipment from our apartment, every member of the fire crew walked past us. And when they did, each one of them stopped. Young and old, they paused, they looked in our eyes, and they said, "We are so sorry." Even in the chaos and the confusion with everything that needed to be done, they recognized our pain and our fear, and they made a place for us, a tiny little heaven in the midst of hell. The owners of the apartment got us a hotel. A few minutes after we checked in, our phone rang. It was Ian and Mark and members of the church who had come with food and toiletries and supplies. The next day, we posted the news on the church email network and on Facebook. By the end of the day, we had several hundred messages of support. When it was announced at the UU district annual meeting that started the night of the fire, we received another 100 emails and a notice that over $1,000 had spontaneously been collected. The next day, a phone call came in from Richard Nugent, the director of finance at the UUA, saying he had just sent a check for $3,000 and there was more if we needed it. The day after that was Sunday. When it was announced at our church, more messages of support and money came in. We received over 20 offers of places to stay. We placed a sign-up sheet in the church website for people to provide about 25 things that we needed. Those requests were filled within 6 hours. We requested meals. Within 8 hours, we had people signed up for 6 weeks. It was on that day I learned something about what it meant to be swept up and what it felt like to really be saved. But what really convinced me of the rapture was coming across all the clothes. Bags and bags of clothes kept getting delivered to the church office. Every time we turned around, there was a new bag of clothes. My office looked like a Red Cross evacuation site. And on the fifth day, we finally had to put out an all points bulletin announcing that we surrendered. People could stop delivering clothes. We had been saved. I want to read you a poem. It's by Thomas Centinela, and it's based on the question of St. John of the Cross and what we do when we face that dark night of the soul. It is called, "In the Evening, We Shall Be Examined on Love." In the evening, we shall be examined on love, and it won't be multiple choice, though some of us would prefer it that way. Neither will it be essay, which tempts us to run on when we should be sticking to the point, if not together. In the evening, there shall be implications that matter. Our fear will change to confusion. No cheating will be told, and we'll try to figure out the cost of being true to ourselves. In the evening, when the sky has turned that certain blue, blue of exam books, blue of no more daily evasions, we shall climb the hill as the light empties, and we will park our tired bodies on the bench above the city and try to fill in the blanks. We won't be tested like defendants on trial, cross-examined till one of us breaks down guilty as charged. No. In the evening, after the day has refused to testify, we shall be examined on love, like students who didn't even recall signing up for the course. And they now must take their orals, forced to speak for once from the heart and not off the top of their heads. And when the evening is over and it's late, the student body asleep, even the great teachers retired for the night, we shall stay up and run back over the questions, each in our own way. What's true? What's false? What unknown quantity will balance the equation? And we will search for what it will mean years from now to look back and know we did not fail. It's important to emphasize that I named my cat Blanche because, like the story of Frank, the parishioner, she understood what it was like to live always teetering on the edge of times. And yet she showed up. I took her in because I needed to learn what she had obviously already discovered in her courageous leap into my life. How it is possible to save someone and be saved all at the same time. At times, it may feel like our world is on fire, that it's hard and unfair. But if you show up and begin to recognize that what is so frightening, what threatens to palsy our stride forward, is not a terribly sophisticated story. It's usually only a few vague references from our past trying to convince us to fear our future. But look closer, because it's that fear that is obscuring the very presence of the holy. The world is not trying to scare you. It's trying to call you. Not so that you are swept up with the chosen, but so that you choose to be part of the sweeping. Because when you are being examined on love And when you show up, you cannot fail. It is by our relentless search for love, not by our worst mistakes, that we will be graded. And in the end, we will be the only one with the red pen who marks our own paper. Live your life in a way that your paper becomes an example to the timid everywhere, so that in the moments where what we find most frightening has crept up behind us, we learn how to turn around and ask it to dance to the glory of life.
Good morning. Would you please join me in singing Will the Circle Be Unbroken? The words are not in your hymnal, but they are on your screen and also in your orders of service. I'd like to thank Georgia and Eric Porchot for joining me in this little adventure this morning. I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day when I saw that hearse come rolling for to carry my mother away. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I said to that undertaker, oh, please, please drive slow, for this lady you are carrying, oh, Lord, I hate to see her go. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Oh, I followed close behind her, tried to hold up and be brave, but I could not hide my sorrow when they laid her in the grave. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. We sang the songs of childhood, hymns of faith that made us strong. Ones that Mother Maybell taught us, hear the angels sing along. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. In the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Will you join me as we unite our voices to recite the words to extinguish our chalice, words known within our hearts and can be found displayed upon your screen? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, reach out with me.
beyond all the fear and protective isolation that keeps us so separated. Oh. Know that in this world there may be many echoes, but there is great company that will save us when we are in great need. Many blessings to us when it feels like we're being swept up, and blessings as we all learn to show up and find the way. Amen, and blessed be.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.